Today we're going to be looking at Overtone in the color Extreme Purple. So very quickly before we get into this, I just want to say that my swatches are labeled 1 through 12, but that is not going to be synonymous with hair levels. I just do different video clips and pictures and such near the end of the video, so the numbers just help us keep track of each swatch. These are human hair swatches, but they are not virgin hair. The only one that's going to be virgin hair is the number 4 black swatch. Otherwise, the rest have been chemically colored, bleached, or treated at some point in their existences. 1 is green. I often get requests to do green with pinks and purples, so I want to see how it turns out with that. 2 is a cool tone gray. 3 is a natural red. Again, 4 is black, and then 4 to 11 is a range that goes to a platinum blonde, and then 12 is like a toned version of number 11. So to start, we're going to take the color directly from the container, and I will apply it to the very top of each swatch. And then some people do like to dilute their dyes, so I'm going to do a diluted version at the bottom of each swatch. Please keep in mind that everyone's hair is different, which means everyone's hair will take color differently. Plus, different screens and monitors can make colors look different as well. So please just use my video as a reference for how this could possibly maybe turn out for you. For the diluted section, we're going to do an 8-to-1 ratio. So that's going to be 1 part of the dye to 8 parts diluter. Now, if you're not sure what diluter is, I always just like to say it's basically something that lightens the color of a semi-permanent dye. Most brands will have their own version of a diluter, which can be really nice because it'll keep the same consistency as the dye that you're using. But because I use so many different brands and I want to keep consistency throughout the channel, I always just use a plain white conditioner as my diluter. All right, I'm gonna let these sit for about an hour. I will then rinse them out, and when they're dry, I'll meet you back here and we can do some comparisons. So the way that Overtone works, they basically have each color in varying pigmentation. So the Extreme Purple is going to be more intense, darker, more pigmented essentially. And now they introduced brown hair versions, so I assume the brown hair versions are probably the most pigmented. The extremes used to be the most pigmented, but I think now it's the second to last to most pigmented. So that being said, while I do see a difference on the brown swatches like 5 and 6, I do like to give a warning that my swatches, again, are not virgin. Virgin hair tends to not be as porous, which means it doesn't absorb semi-permanent pigments as well as non-virgin hair. So oftentimes my brown swatches will absorb the color a little bit better than your hair would if it was virgin. And if your hair is virgin and it does work for you, sometimes it can wash out really fast. So I just wanted to give that warning. I would say if your hair is any darker than maybe like the 8 or even the 7, I would probably try the brown haired version unless your hair is not virgin. Then you might have a better chance of it working. But again, always do research, always do strand tests. So one was originally green. The top half covered really well. I don't see any green coming through, but it did turn out a lot darker than it did on, like, you know, the lighter swatches. So if you don't want it this dark, you might be able to get away with diluting it a little bit, but my 8:1 definitely did not cover the green. So do a little at a time, I would say. 2 was originally the gray. This time around, I would say it doesn't actually look too wildly different on the direct dye portion than it does on the lighter swatches. It's probably a little bit darker and a little bit more ashy than it looks on the blonde. The bigger difference, I would say, is actually on the diluted section. I said that the top looks kind of ashy, kind of muted. It definitely continues down through the diluted section. You don't see a lot of the brightness that you see on the like platinum blonde swatch, and it actually looks a lot more cool toned as well. I see a little bit more pinky tones coming through over the platinum. So 3 was originally the natural red swatch. Oftentimes I've been noticing that that swatch turns out quite similarly to maybe 6 or 7 or somewhere in between, and I would say for the direct dye portion that's still pretty true. Sometimes the warmth in the natural red can make a little bit of a difference in the direct dye portions, but because this purple is so dark, I don't think it changed it too much. It just looks kind of like a really dark purple over the 3 and the 6. I probably see a little bit more pigment coming through on the 3 than I do the 6, so it might be a little bit closer to the 7. The diluted section, it looks probably a little less red than it did before, and it probably did change the undertone a little bit as well. It's just a little bit hard to tell when I can't see the befores, because it does still look like a pretty natural red for the most part, but there probably is a slight difference. 4, there's absolutely no difference. 5, the top does look a little bit darker than the bottom, but they both still look like a dark brown. I'm assuming the purple did kind of change the undertone of the brown. It made it a little bit more cool toned, but it still pretty much looks brown. The 6 is kind of similar, where if you look at the brown swatch next to the top half, it almost looks like it's just a darker brown than it was before. I think probably in natural lighting, it probably does look a little bit more purple, but I would say it almost has like a natural quality to it, even though it's not directly a brown and it is darker than it was before. And then 8 is where I would say the hair looks directly purple. As for the diluted section, I would also say 8 is where you can really start to see a difference. Now, if you look at the 8 compared to the 11, it's definitely not strictly purple, but it did kind of give it like a nice pinky purple sheen. If you're going for a pastel purple, like you wanted to dilute this, I definitely think the platinum blonde is the best bet. 9 and 10 also look kind of purpley on the bottom, but it doesn't have that like pastel-y purple look to it the same way that 11 and I guess 12 even would too. Now this purple is not super warm in undertone, and it's not super cool in undertone either. I would say it's kind of like a right in the middle kind of purple. On the top it looks a lot more cool toned, but then when you dilute it you can see more warmth coming through, and because of that I don't think it's super necessary to tone your hair first unless your hair is super yellow. But you can see on the tone swatch it turns out a lot darker on both the top and the bottom. You lose a little bit of that brightness that you get with the platinum blonde swatch. And again, it does seem pigmented enough to kind of cover it. But as usual, always do a strand test. So as for comparisons, I figure we could compare some purple. The first comparison I wanted to do is Arctic Fox in the color Purple AF. This is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and comparable to number 9. So this was actually the second most similar color that I had. My next comparison will be the most similar color that I have. And as you can see, the Purple AF is just a little bit more warm in undertone compared to the Extreme Purple. I think it might be a little bit harder to tell on the direct dye portion, but you can definitely tell on the diluted sections. There's just a little bit more of the pinky warmth coming through. And if you're looking for something that's even more warm in undertone next to the Arctic Fox, I would say the Manic Panic Purple Haze is the next in line in terms of warmth. My most similar comparison is going to be Directions in the color Violet. This is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and 9. I feel like you can kind of see what I'm saying now, where the extreme purple seems to be really perfectly in the middle, at least maybe in my opinion. So the violet, again, is kind of hard to tell on the direct dye swatch, but you can see with the diluted section, it is a little bit more cool in undertone. And one thing I do notice about cooler tone purples is they tend to be a little less pigmented, which you can kind of see on the number 9 that the diluted section didn't take as well. And it starts to kind of brighten up as well. But it is quite dark, so if you have medium to light blonde hair, the directions might still be okay, but you might have better luck with the extreme purple just because it has just a touch more warmth in it, which seems to stick to the hair a little bit better in my experience. Hopefully that was helpful, but now I'd like to get into the before and after clips. Those, as well as everything after this point in the video, are now going to be done in natural lighting.
Follow the signs, you're looking like a one-way. Gotta make the right choice. Hope I make the right noise. Hoping that you like boys like me. I know you're feeling me from across the room. I got a feeling you could be my muse. I hear strange when I see you. You say green, but I see blue. Either way, your eyes the ones I'm looking to. When I'm hell first, falling from heaven, baby. Living on the prayer that you catch and save me. I was unaware of our elevation till I looked down. All the people look like it's not high. When you're on my side, high up in the sky, cruising through the night.
I hope my video helped. If you have a request, I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out, but just remember, I only do brands that do not test on animals. Thank you so very much to my patrons, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.